So the following video is is an interview with the Finnish, I think, lieutenant colonel called Simo Pesu, and he is being interviewed by a woman called Päivärinta. I don't know her first name. I don't actually watch Finnish TV at all, but I'll try to translate what they're saying, because I think the Finnish military personnel are pretty well equipped to talk about Russia in general and military things as well, and they seem to be pretty straightforward too, so that's nice. So I'll pause the video every now and then, just so that I can keep up with what they're saying, but I'll just try and translate it on the go, and I'll check the volume level. Yeah, because I was thinking maybe I would just you don't need to hear what they're actually saying, but it's sort of unnatural. So something unnatural about it when people are talking, you don't hear what they're saying. So let's start from the beginning. See how it goes. So welcome, Lieutenant Colonel Simo Pesu, to the interview. Thank you for the invitation. Russian war is going on in Ukraine for the third week now. Civilian buildings and infrastructure is being bombed. There's a lot of from international media, a lot of messages that the Russian army is in big trouble. What is the situation? What does it look like for an expert in warfare? The first step of this invasion started on the 24th of February. The first days, they tried to just destroy the Ukrainian army by just movement. And they tried the first 4 days to just push through. They used small units that would try and push into the area, and then accurate weaponry, and it was a limited kind of warfare. Then the Ukrainian opposition would increase, and then the push just ended after about 5 days. Then they started moving to the next step, or it seemed, and they brought in new troops, and they started fighting in bigger formations to encircle the cities, and it has been carrying on since after the 5th day, so about 3 weeks, and we've been observing it from the sidelines, and it still keeps going on. Do you agree that there's a lot of messages been coming in that the Russian army is running out of force? So if we look at what the United States government is saying, they probably have a good idea about it. All of the Russian forces that are tied up right now in the attack. If we look at the earlier Russian attacks, the things that we look at, this is the first war that the modern Russia has gone through. If we want to observe more Russian wars, we have to go back in the past. Russia has been in very limited military conflicts, but never in a war where they're not outnumbering the enemy. And now they began this war with the same mentality that they have large, like they would have a large force with a weaker opponent, but the weaker opponent is pushing back now. This is a new situation for the Russian military and politics. There's another question: is the Russian force running out, or the power behind the army running out? If you start preparing for this kind of operation, you have this kind of kind of thought. The first step is you beat the enemy, you start pushing in. The second step is going in and circling from the rear and start controlling the space and areas, and pushes the enemy away and then takes over their logistics. Over here in this situation, the second step is missing. They've pushed into the fight, but then they don't have the second step. And the second step is usually done by mobilization or conscription. And here is the problem that the Russian government has promised to the people without signing anything that Russia Russia will not mobilize their conscripts. And we're talking about days and weeks and how the people are going to agree with this kind of thing if they use conscripts. So when you put people and money into the military, it's a thing that you should prepare the people. It's said that a lot of people don't even know that it is a war, but it's a special operation rather than a war, so they don't really know how things are. There, the government says that they've admitted that conscripts have been in the war or in the fight, but then they will find the ones who were guilty for it, and this war doesn't have anything to do with the average Russian. They can just keep doing what they're doing, and they're trying to reach their goal with the power or force that they have right now. I can't see anything stopping this war. Both of the sides can fight. They're organized, and they seem to be carrying it on. And usually, this kind of a conflict culminates until either side or both just run out of strength and will to fight and power to fight. If you think about this from a professional point of view, what were the mistakes that in the Russian strategy that you were talking about? Like, they've used this old kind of strategy to go into Ukraine. They haven't really taken any big towns, and they have taken losses. I wouldn't say there were mistakes. A nation makes its choices with the information that they have. And I don't know if there's any mistakes that have been made, but if you think about I'll pause it just for a moment. If you think about their objectives and what they were trying to achieve, the Russians, they expected that the Ukrainians are going to give up earlier, and the Ukrainian military is going to give up. So there's some kind of information break between the military and the political decision making, that they haven't really understood what kind of a battle they're going into. And no responsible general who he's not going to have a couple of days planned and then go to war. He should always be prepared to go into war with a long plan. And the first contact with the enemy will usually scrap any plan you have. And after which you go into the next step. The places where they're going, or the eastern Ukraine where they're having the battles, it's optimal logistically for Russia. The main Russian logistical infrastructure has been built. This sort of Kiev, St. Petersburg, and Moscow triangle, and all the infrastructure is there. The Russian logistics have railways and then pipes. So you can run a military operation and push forward. You need material resources, and you need to push them to the front. There's nothing is stopping it. The biggest thing that's stopping it is the amount of troops and you need to repair vehicles and munitions, and you need medicine. Three things you need. You need munitions, fuel, and food. If there is no munitions in the front, then the push will stop. And at around 4 to 5 days, that's what happened after the attack. And right now, we're in like a swamp because there's nothing going back or forward. Now they're thinking, do the Russians have a force to push somewhere around this huge area of land? If they can collect more manpower, then they can probably push forward. But then, is it enough or is it not? If both sides are satisfied that they have enough strength to go on, then the war will go on. What do you think about Russia asking China for help? So that sounds like information that's in the media. So Russia has sold weapons to China until like year 2000. Then they stopped selling them because the Chinese started copying the weapons. So then they started trading with China again, the Russians, 2014. They realized that the Chinese are getting so good at technology, so they have a short window of maybe 10 years to keep selling things to China until they catch up. And this is what Russia is doing. Russia sells weapons to China, and they're going to do it for 8 or 9 years, or have been doing it, and will do it until China catches up. What their Russian own technology is missing is the drones and things like that. And Israelis have a lot of different drones, and they haven't really been able to use them. Russians need Chinese technology. It says more about it says more about that they're not really in a rush to get the weapons or help, but they want to pressure China a little bit to make a choice. So what does China need Russia for? So natural resources. So China needs trade with Europe and USA. There's no strategic importance for China with Russia. It might even be counterproductive. But then there's the Chinese and Russian leadership have acknowledged each other and their friendship. So if the Chinese leadership says that Russia is our friend, then it doesn't, even if it doesn't make sense to help them, they might help them. So they have to figure something out with the Russians now. The Chinese, it's good for the Chinese to have a friendly, stable Russia next door who they can, rely on and who will work with them. And if that goes wrong, then it's more dangerous for China. From your expert view, you're a military expert. For a layman, the layman is shocked that Russia is striking civilian targets, killing civilians without mercy. Why is Russia doing this? Could they not be doing this? So violence is emotional and chaotic always. A planned violence, it has enormous risk of getting out of control. So that's why professionals in violence are trained over and over. When the fighting started, cruise missiles were hitting civilian buildings, but the amount of force that was used was not big, so it was limited compared to the amount of targets. In the beginning, the Russians used force, a limited force. But then when you start using heavy weapons, immediately there are situations where you cannot control what happens. This is, you can't go around this. It always happens. The other thing is, the city is difficult as a war zone. The Ukrainians are fortifying the cities. If you try to force your way into a city, your movement stops, and then your power or strength will be vertically and horizontally spread. So your force will be dispersed into the city, and Russians have not forced themselves into the cities yet. They've used artillery and things with the house, but they haven't really gotten into the cities. And I'll pause here. This is from March 16th, so now they have Mariupol, at least, I think, militarily, but yeah. So that's why that's why the Ukrainians are holding on to the cities. But this is the other side that you mentioned, which is that the city's infrastructure is going to be destroyed, and then it's a result of this kind of strategy and tactics. But this increases probably the Ukrainian military spirit and fighting spirit. But this is not something the attacker probably wants, but it can turn into hate. But they haven't really got into town. But then when we look at the Russian military skill, let's go back to Chechnya. The Volograchov, the defense minister in Russia in the 90s, went to war so that he needs just like paratroopers, and then he's done. Afterwards, we can say that it wasn't realistic. They got beaten up in Grozny, but then they fixed it and they leveled the entire Grozny because they could not take it over. They just leveled it completely. It took months. The battle took months. Even though the militaries were half the size what were going on, and the Chechnya population is smaller than Ukrainian, but it still took months. The mission is very difficult, so that we tie the Ukrainian military into the city. The use of it's impossible to avoid fighting in cities. So we just have to destroy one building at a time until. If you want to see how Aleppo looks before 2015, and then see what it looks like after 2016, it tells you that what does it mean when you're trying to push people away from the town, and there are people fortified in the town, or soldiers in the town. This is what it looks like afterwards. Aleppo. Will Russians do this? And then we go into which looks, what does the Russian mentality look like? They're pushing propaganda, but if you start leveling cities and stuff, then it's different to keep that kind of propaganda. We cannot deny that it might happen, but Aleppo is far away, and you can level it much more easy than the Kievan capital. But there's nothing stopping them, really. You can tie the Ukrainian forces there, but if you start leveling the city, then manpower might run out, and it disappears into the city. What is the effect of Western help for Ukraine? Ukraine has been able to fight back, so we sell them weapons, intelligence, and what is the biggest effect on the Ukrainian, or what is the biggest reason Ukrainian has been able to fight back that well? It means that they've been preparing for the war for 8 years. They weren't prepared in 2014, but now they're prepared for 8 years for the war. And they know how to defend their country, here and there. It's been shown. Now we're speaking of. So the first step of the Russian attack was movement, and then and now we're sort of in the spending phase. The attacker is spending themselves in it, defender, and the attacker has to move around, and they always spend more of themselves than the defense. The Ukrainians can establish new forces. Can they create equal or more troops than they are using, the Ukrainians, and then have they got the weaponry and everything for that? And that's what they need the help for. First, they had the basic tools in the Russian. They had equipment to stop the Russian mechanized infantry units and anti-air. But what the Ukrainians don't have, and would it be reasonable, they don't have large military units that they would start striking back at Russians and push them away from these cities, and that would be a very different warfare. And this is what the Russians have been practicing. They've been practicing with large military operations, following these rules. Big units facing in quick battle. The Ukrainians are fighting guerrilla warfare. It's possible when you keep getting more materials, it's possible to keep it going. There's one main point to success in military, and it's logistics. Munitions. All right, let me. Sorry about that. So weapons, munitions, fuel, food, and soldiers, manpower. So Russians don't really have much friends, and China sort of is not going to militarily probably help Russia, but Ukraine is getting help. If Russia runs out of these things that you mentioned before, is there a danger that when there's no options left for Russians, that you can use a tactical nuclear weapon that will solve this problem with a nuclear weapon? I wouldn't think about it too much. Nuclear weapons have one purpose, so you're scaring people. That's why they exist. Tactical nuclear weapons have a basic need. So if an enemy is much larger than you, and then you need to destroy their base structures, bases and things like that, that's when you can use a tactical weapon. Russian taxonomy, there's 4 steps: military conflict, weapon. Oh my God! There's 4 different ways of fighting, and it increases from one. And Russia has done only small conflicts, but now they're in like the second stage, which is like stationary warfare in a way, or situational warfare. And in this kind of warfare, if Russia was fighting like a NATO type military alliance, those questions would be more reasonable, that they can't defend themselves anymore. That's when we can start thinking that these kind of weapons might actually have a use. There's a different governing system for nuclear weapons. You don't give them to the football to the commanders, the one that launches them. There's a different organization, different people who do it. How many people are there? Well, we don't know. The governments don't let them know of the chain of operations, how these things work, but the chain is long, and you need many people's approval and analysis that this is necessary. It's the leader of the government, the defense minister, commander of the armed forces, and then you have these chains, and and in these chains there might be more small parts that need to be. Could a nuclear war be possible? That's why militaries are given commanders, and the commander's mission is to, or task is to be responsible for this kind of things like nuclear weapons, so that things like irrational things won't happen. Violence or force is always limited. Only like a uncontrolled nuclear war, it's pretty far-fetched. We've never tried nuclear war. We don't have any models. We only have theoretical conversation. But I'd like to bring out that the main reason for a nuclear weapon is to scare others. First, we stop Ukraine from getting help with the nuclear weapon fear. But you can try and ignore the nuclear weapon and try and help them. So NATO won't close the airspace of Ukraine because of this fear of escalation. So the Great British Defense Minister said that Russia might be planning a chemical or a biological weapon, or in red, what's the red flag? Not red flag, but false flag operations. How do you estimate this? The kind of technically it's possible, but what do you want to achieve with that? It's a mechanism for terror. So Russia has used chemical weapons to kill their own people, fully knowing that they're doing it. The Syrian government has used them as well. It's a mechanism for terror. You want the people to give up and be afraid of you. Using such a weapon, using this kind of terror in this kind of a situation where people are related to each other, the Ukrainians and Russians, in a lot of times. Basically, you could use it as a weapon of terror, but what would be the end result of it? What would it be? Well, if you poison your neighbor's people who have relations with each other, who are family with each other, in massive scale or even a small scale. In a small scale, the terror might be possible, but then they're not going to be blaming it on Russian government. Some type of scenarios that whereas soldiers, military personnel think about all of these options and possibilities, but what are you going to achieve? What would Russia gain from using that kind of weapons? And what would the effect of people be? But the same way, they're still killing Russian family members in Ukraine with other normal kind of weapons. Dare you say that? What do you think? How long will this go on? Or is something going to happen, something positive or even more terrible than is already going on? So many weeks probably, or surely. There's nothing surprising thing that could stop this. The spending of munitions and vehicles, and we don't have any more strength to take over anything. So within months, there has to be some kind of culmination to this situation. Then there's an option or possibility that the intensity goes down, and then you make a ceasefire, and then you restart the conflict once you've gathered yourself. But the long war is really hard for the Russian government. That's why they tried to gain a quick victory, but it's not going to happen anymore. At least weeks, and could be months, and yeah. It's going to stay similar for a long time. Thank you very much for this interview. Okay. So yeah, that was like my a few places, because I'm not a professional translator, so in a few places I left a lot of just filler words and everything out, but basically that's what he was saying, and I hope you can make sense out of what I said, because I made this video because I usually like to listen to YouTube when I'm walking or doing jogging or something, and then it would be sort of easier and more accurate to make just make subtitles. But then, you know, if you want to listen to the videos and stuff, then it's nice to have audio. And yeah, if you like this kind of stuff, or if you want me to improve something, take more pauses and breaks and sort of explain what's going on, then let me know. But this was let me just check his name again. Simo Pesu, Lieutenant Colonel in the Finnish military on the 16th of March, 2022.